Ой, между класс, там надо отбывать. Ага. Если в 11 поедете, если не свободно, ко мне поедете домой. Ага, хорошо. Ага. А время будет в час или будет? Хорошо. Ага. Хорошо, в час я свободна.
Test 1 2, test 1 2. Thank you, Yelena. That was lovely. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos on this last Sunday before we start the fall, last summer Sunday. My name is Elisa Enriquez, and I'm your worship associate for this congregation, or one of them. Our minister, Reverend John Cullinam, is off today, and I'm delighted to welcome Mike Adams. Many of you know Mike, longtime member and friend. Welcome all of you, whether you're here in the sanctuary or watching online. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person and the interconnection of all. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are at this moment, and wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. If you're joining us for the first time, I invite you to talk to Tina DeYoe, Director of Lifespan Education, or any one of us after the service. You can also return next week when John Cullinan will be back at the pulpit. If you're watching online, please sign our virtual guest book. There's a link to the book in the notes below the video. Everyone is invited to join in refreshments and conversation after in the fellowship hall. You can take the food and drink outside and remove your masks. Again, welcome. We're glad you're with us. Let us begin worship. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Please rise and body your spirit as you're able, and join me in singing hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Please remain standing and join me in the affirmation of our church. Love is the doctrine of the church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve life in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each and with all. Please be seated. Candles have been lit this morning in celebration of Andy Enriquez's 16th birthday, which was the 15th. And thinking of Rick Bolton's sister Paula, who is in hospice care. Think of Rick. Celebrating our karaoke superstars from last night's karaoke for a cause. In gratitude for our awesome Afghan refugee family that our church co-sponsors. It's helping them to get resettled, and all of the volunteers involved. This prayer is called A Litany of Restoration by Marjorie Bones Wheatley. If, recognizing the interdependence of all life, we strive to build community, the strength we gather will be our salvation. If you are black and I am white, it will not matter. If you're a female and I am male, it will not matter. If you're progressive and I am conservative, it will not matter. If you're straight and I am gay, it will not matter. If you are Christian and I am Jewish, it will not matter. If we join spirits as brothers and sisters, the pain of our aloneness will be lessened, and that does matter. In this spirit, we build community and move toward restoration. Please join in our meditation hymn. Now the young and young at heart will join our Director of Religious Lifespan Education, Tina DeYoe.
All right, can you all hear me? Yes. Awesome, welcome, welcome. Hey guys, so today our speaker, Mike Adams, who's back there, is going to be talking about some topics about patriarchy and some other stuff like that. And so we know that for a long time, people who identify as women or girls have struggled having equal rights in the world. And so we're going to talk about some of these awesome women that have persisted. And I am wearing my She Persisted shirt. And we're going to read excerpts out of this book, She Persisted, around the world, and learn about some of these awesome women. You may have heard of some, you may have not, and some even local women that I added. And this is by Chelsea Clinton, and I have adapted some of it. So this is our story for this morning. All right. It's not always easy being a girl anywhere in the world. It's especially challenging in some places. There are countries where it's hard for girls to go to school and where women need their husband's permission to get a passport or even to leave the house. And all over the world, girls are more likely to be told to be quiet, to sit down, to have smaller dreams. Don't listen to those voices. These women from across the world didn't. They persisted. How do I do this? Oh, I have to aim it back there, not up there. All right. So this is Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. And she was the first great poet of Latin America and a leading literary figure in the Spanish Golden Age. She was growing up in Mexico, and most girls did not go to school. So she studied on her own and asked her family if she could disguise herself as a boy so she could go to university. They said no. She persisted. So she has written poems and plays that are still celebrated today. All right, next one. Caroline Herschel. Ooh. Although Caroline Herschel's mother didn't think girls should be educated, her father taught her alongside her brothers. But after typhus left Caroline permanently stunted at just over 4 feet tall, both parents thought her only future was to be a servant. She persisted, leaving her native Germany to live in England with her brother William, who supported her efforts to further educate herself, including in math and astronomy. Ooh. And they studied the night sky, and Caroline became the first woman to discover a comet. And she has a lot named after her. So that is Caroline. Kate Shepherd. Kate Shepherd, do not think your single vote does not matter much. The rain that refreshes the parched ground is made up of single drops. So that was one of her quotes. So she began traveling throughout the country New Zealand, saying that women deserve voting rights. Many men believed that women should avoid meddling in masculine concerns. But when Kate first tried to get Parliament to give women the right to vote, they didn't listen. Even though she brought them many petitions that thousands of women had signed, she still persisted. So she helped women get voting rights in New Zealand. Ooh, some of you may know this next woman, Marie Curie. Ooh, who knows her? Yeah. Okay. Growing up in Poland, Marie Curie knew that because she was a girl, she would have to leave her country to go to college. She persisted, moving to France to pursue her dream of being a scientist. Her work in radioactivity, The way that some materials give off energy led to her becoming the first woman awarded a Nobel Prize in physics. And she discovered 2 new elements, one of which she named polonium after her country. So for that work, she won her 2nd Nobel Prize in chemistry. And she was the first person in the world, man or woman, to receive 2 Nobel Prizes. She persisted. Viola Desmond. So this lady was a Canadian and was on a business trip, and her car broke down. So she decided to go to the movies while she waited for it to be fixed. But Viola didn't know that in the town she was visiting, only white Canadians were allowed to sit on the movie theater's main floor. When Viola was asked to leave, she persisted in saying that it was her right to sit wherever she wanted, and she was arrested and put in jail. But her decision to fight the charges against her helped start the modern civil rights movement in Canada. And then you see her older, and she got put on some of the Canadian money. That's pretty cool. Viola. Yeah.
There are always some cent pieces that are worth $2.
Yeah.
Canadian accent.
Yeah, Canadian pieces that are worth $2. That is so cool. Thank you, Rowan. Dr. Mary Verghese. So while working in India as a young doctor focused on caring for women, Mary Verghese was in a terrible car crash and lost the use of her legs. Rather than quit medicine, she persisted. She shifted her work to the kind of care she could give patients from her wheelchair, just as well as anyone could standing up. So she focused on rehabilitation work. So that's her over there and her there. So that's Mary Verghese. Aisha Rateb, I'm not pronouncing these right, so I apologize, probably. So she went to law school, and she's in Egypt, and she hoped to become a judge in Egypt. But then the prime minister told Aisha that she couldn't because a female judge would be against the traditions of society. But she persisted in doing important legal work and helping to write a new constitution for Egypt. Okay, I'm not going to pronounce this right. If anyone knows how to pronounce this name right, does anyone? Anyone? Wangari Maathai. So as the first woman in East and Central Africa to earn a doctorate degree and become a professor at the University of Nairobi, Wangari Maathai made 2 of her dreams come true. Still, she wanted to do more. Horrified by how many trees had been cut down across Kenya, Wangari started to plant trees. She persisted in getting family, friends, students, and even strangers to help plant more trees and respect the environment, and worked hard to protect and defend the rights of everyone in Kenya. She was the first African American woman awarded the Nobel Peace Prize as well. Sissy Lima Duamor. She is a soccer player from Brazil. That's pretty cool. She was young, and it was against the law for girls to play soccer in Brazil. What? But Sissy wanted to play even if she got in trouble. So, guess what she did? She persisted. So, first in secret, turning other toys into soccer balls and practicing wherever she could. Eventually, Sissy's parents got her a soccer ball. So when she was 14, 2 years after Brazil made it legal for girls to play soccer, Sissy started playing professionally and then joined the first Brazilian women's national soccer team. Woo! Yes. So she, at the height of her career, was called the Queen of Brazilian Football. All right. Next one. Lema Gbowee. Civil war erupted in Liberia when Lema Gbowee had just finished high school. Living through the war inspired Lema to become a trauma counselor to help other children affected by conflict. When the Civil War broke out again years later, Lema knew she didn't want to simply live through it this time or help the victims afterward. She wanted to help end it. She persisted, bringing together thousands of Liberian Christian and Muslim women to peacefully protest the violence. And that's one of her quotes there. In order for us to mobilize these women to get them that place, we had to do a whole process of re-socialization, that you can sit like this, that you can do like this, you can be like this, you can be loud, you can get involved in politics. So that's pretty cool, she did that. Yuan Tan. So when she was growing up in China, her father did not want his daughter to take ballet, but she persisted in convincing him that being a dancer was her destiny. Finally, her father said that he would decide Yuan's fate with a coin toss. Oh my gosh. If the coin landed on heads, she could pursue ballet. If the coin landed on tails, she couldn't. Yuan won the coin toss. She went on to become among the most famous Chinese ballerinas of all times, winning many awards, and she became the youngest principal dancer ever at the San Francisco Ballet, where she still performs today. Oh, some of you guys know this one. Malala. Yes, Malala is an awesome woman. Yusuf, how do you say her last name? Do y'all know? Yusufazi? Yusufazi? Yeah, correct me. I know, it's hard to say, but when Malala was 11, she began writing about how much she wanted to get an education. She just wanted to learn, like you guys learn, right? Like, we all get to learn here. And even though some people in her native Pakistan thought girls shouldn't go to school, Malala was threatened many times, but she persisted in writing about her dreams for herself and girls everywhere to get an education. But when Malala was 15, a man boarded her school bus and shot her. She got shot, targeting her because of her courage in standing up for girls' rights to go to school. Even after she was hurt, Malala did not get up. She is the youngest ever Nobel Peace Prize winner and still works hard in hope that one day every child will be able to go to school. All right, so that's Malala. And then we have some local people here I added. Elder Kathy Sanchez from San Ildefonso Pueblo. So she is an awesome woman that helped start Tewa Women United. And she is a social activist, a community educator, and a traditional blackware potter from San Ildefonso. And like I said, she helped found Tewa Women United, and she has dedicated her life to working on culture, the environment, and social change. And she has developed transformative tools, all from Native women's lived perspectives. So that's pretty cool. And she's organized with rural and indigenous women at the UN Committee on the Status of Women, testified at New Mexico public hearings on Los Alamos' lab's devastating impact on health and environment, and much more. And she also helped found the Gathering of Mother Earth annual celebration that happens just right down the road. So she's pretty cool. And I want us to celebrate an awesome living treasure that she didn't even know, but Cook Young McNaughton, I think we should give an awesome round of applause to. And Cook Young is in our community. She's right back there. And she's an awesome woman that I look up to a lot, and many of you, I'm sure, do as well. So we have awesome women right here. I mean, I see tons of awesome women, and awesome men, and awesome non-binary, and awesome gender fluid folks, right? So, and transgender. So Cook Young is also an awesome living treasure in our community and has done lots of social action work. And so that's a lot of her work. She teaches Tai Chi, if you guys want to join. And she helped get a lot of these things, awesome initiatives started in our community. And Cook Young, I'm quoting what the paper said, that you would be the first to acknowledge that if you don't have support and help from others, your passion won't flower. And so together people can make things happen. So I just wanted to celebrate your awesome recognition. So thank you, Cook Young, for being a woman that has persisted in this community. And that is some of our awesome women that we learned about. And then there's some awesome coloring pages of awesome women at our attention table. So keep lifting up these awesome women that persist.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Good morning. I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth today, to be honest, because I started working on a sermon a while ago based on a men's group that I had put together, but there's too much content. This topic is too dense. And I've only scratched the surface of beginning to understand what there is to understand. So I'm going to read the beginning of what I started to write in my sermon, and then I'm going to freeform it at some point, and someone may have to shut me up. Because everything's important, and there's just not enough time to cover what's important. On Thursday, December 16th of this past year, I was readying myself for bed. This entails a variety of things like setting my clothes out for the next day, making sure coffee is ready to be brewed in the morning, browsing through my personal emails because I don't have an opportunity to browse them until right before bedtime usually. While browsing through my emails to look for personal emails or important professional emails, a headline caught my eye. And as I read the article, a light sheet of sadness descended upon me. Bell Hooks, one of my favorite authors, had died from kidney failure the day before. A year or two earlier, my wife had mentioned that there is no equivalent book to White Fragility for men who have overly sensitive reactions to feminist ideas. And we do, men, incidentally. We do have overly sensitive reactions to feminist ideas when they're put out there, in the same way that white people have overly sensitive reactions to racist ideas when they're put out there. I liked bell hooks. My wife pointed that out, and I thought, like, wow, that's an interesting point. And I asked her if she had any recommendations for books I should read or something like that. And she said, you maybe check out bell hooks, and she sent me a few links, and the next thing I know, I had this like extensive book list. And I'm gonna talk about some of those books. And what ended up happening was I thought, I need a men's group where we can listen to these books on Audible and then talk about our experiences growing up and our beliefs and sort of get a sense about patriarchy and misogyny and sexism and where we were maybe even, not maybe even, where we were perpetuating these problems, where we weren't even aware that we were perpetuating these problems, where we could start to uncover what we didn't know about our own attitudes and problematic behaviors. Our group was composed of 5 men bringing various interests and backgrounds. We had 2 geeky IT types, 1 geeky project coordinator, a geeky environmental engineer, and a geeky detective for the police department. The things we mostly had in common were a tendency towards geekiness, obviously, along with personal interests in identifying how misogyny had surreptitiously infiltrated our attitudes, communications, and actions. Our conversations covered a variety of topics like where we clearly recognized misogyny in life, where we were surprised to discover misogyny after becoming familiar with the contents of bell hooks material, where we participated in misogyny, where our spouses told us we participated in misogyny, but we thought they were wrong. That last topic was the best while also being the most challenging. And so a lot of what I'm going to invite people to consider today, especially the men, is that this topic and any topic which is difficult necessarily is not a binary topic. There are binary aspects of the topic, but it is not a binary topic. It is nuanced. It is complicated. It's complex. And that's where we can start to dismantle it. But the fact is, one binary truth about it is that sexism, patriarchy, will not be challenged or dismantled without men's participation. Racism will not be dismantled without white people's participation. Sexism will not be dismantled without men's participation. It requires the people who hold the societal power and who enforce that societal power to actually learn about the oppression and actively involve themselves in dismantling the oppression. Without that, like if, it's just a fact, if brown people had the power to dismantle racism, it wouldn't exist. Like, I wouldn't live with that crap if I had the power to dismantle it, right? If women had the power to dismantle sexism and patriarchy, it wouldn't exist, period. So it's being held in place by another group of people, and if it's not being held in place, and it is partly being held in place by women, but I'm not going to talk about that today, but if it's not being held in place by them, it's being held in place by men. And that is a binary fact. That's a true or false. But most of the topics explored within sexism, patriarchy, misogyny, however you want to look at that, are not binary. They are nuanced. They are complex. There is truth. There are things to look at. There are aspects that are going to resonate with you or me or someone individually, which are statistically true and may not be true in this particular case or that particular case. And the challenge is to not latch on to those individual cases where that's not me or that's not happening in this, and then to write, not to pay attention and to write the whole thing off, right? So I'm going to touch on some of my reading, and I'm not going to go into details. I'm going to give you some titles and some authors that I think are really worthwhile. My favorite author is Bell Hooks, and the book I started with was Feminism is for Everybody, which is a newer book. She wrote that a few years before her death. And she picked that title on purpose. Feminism is for everybody. It's for everybody, and it's for everybody. And Bell Hooks was just amazing. She was an amazing thinker, an amazing author. She saw relationships between sexism and racism in a way that kind of is rare. She was fantastic. I highly recommend Bell Hooks. I also read Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks. That was, I believe, her first book. I have, and this is an open invitation, I have a book called The Courage to Change, and it's for men. It's one of her last books. It's for men. So I'm interested in having another men's group where we meet on a weekly basis and we work through these chapters, and then we talk about our experiences, and hopefully it can start to make a difference in the areas in our lives with our sisters, our spouses, our parents, where they have complaints that we're having a hard time seeing. I read We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi. I cannot pronounce her last name, I'm sorry. We should all be feminists. And I need my glasses now. This is new for me. Colonize This, Young Women of Color on Today's Feminism. It was curated by Daisy Hernandez and Bushra Komen. Vigilante Gender Violence, Social Class, the Gender Bargain by Rebecca Alvarez, who's a professor at, I want to say Western New Mexico University, but I could be mistaken. She's local to New Mexico, and she's fantastic. She's amazing. She sent me this book that she wrote, and I'm working on my second time through it now. It's pretty amazing. No Visible Bruises, which is not marketed as a book about feminism. It's a book about domestic violence, but it ties to misogyny, and it's all about like misogyny in ways. Like, how many people here knew that how many people here believe that domestic violence, or you have a sense that domestic violence is about a crime of passion, that someone loses their temper and then violence occurs? Raise your hand if you think that that is or may be the truth or often the truth. You know, it's not. It's not. Most domestic violence is tied to misogyny. It's a sense of ownership. Because if it were simply a crime of passion, the same person who is being looked at for having attacked their spouse or their children, they would also lose their temper at work and attack a coworker. They would also lose their temper on the bus. And I'm not saying that this never happens, it does happen, but it's not the majority of domestic violence. The majority of perpetrators of domestic violence do not have legal problems in other arenas necessarily. So it's a calculated move, and it happens with usually a female spouse or partner that they feel they have the right to control. It is an assertion of control, dominance, and ownership. It's male supremacy. It is not. The way we often treat domestic violence is like it is a crime of passion, and it is not a crime of passion. And the way we try to treat people who are engaged in domestic violence is by sending them to anger control classes. Anger control has its benefits. I'm not going to discount that, but it's not going to touch at the root cause, which is a sense of ownership and a sense of entitlement to control what a woman in your life is doing. So I want to start with a few definitions, because it turns out even when I was writing this blurb, I didn't have some of these definitions down. And it occurred to me, usually I start with definitions when I'm working on any kind of sermon, and I didn't do it in this case, and I actually looked them up this morning. So I'm going to start with patriarchy. I asked Alexa this morning for a definition of patriarchy, and then I had to look it up and write it down because I didn't. And I'm not going to give you the whole thing, but basically, patriarchy is a social system of control. It's a social or political system where men have more control and more power. But patriarchy is a social or familial organizational system. It's political in nature. Sexism are attitudes and behaviors which are consistent with patriarchy. Attitudes and behaviors based on traditional gender roles. Misogyny is emotional by nature. It is hatred, distrust, dislike, or mistrust of women. So misogyny is very personal. Sexism is intellectual belief. Patriarchy is social and political in nature. And I found that very enlightening to think about, because I had been using terms in the wrong arena, and I've been doing that for a while, it turns out. And each one has a different role to play. Misogyny has a role to play in the personal domestic violence that maybe occurs within a household. That's misogyny. Patriarchy is the system that views domestic violence as a different kind of crime than battery. And I want that to sink in for a second. Patriarchy is the political, social system that we all share, which views domestic violence, in most cases a man beating his spouse or children, or somehow abusing them, as a different kind of crime than assault and battery. And in most cases, as a lesser crime. And in most cases, as a crime that's not even worthy of being investigated. That's patriarchy. Sexism plays into that because of the attitude that has that be a lesser crime or a crime unworthy of being investigated. And misogyny plays into that mostly in terms of the person doing the abusing, the perpetrator of the abuse. So they're linked, but there is a distinction to be had there. Socially, we collectively, whether you individually believe in this or not, collectively we support and allow domestic violence to continue, and we allow it to be a lesser crime, an uninvestigated crime, and we tolerate that. In many cases, we even encourage it. We victim blame. That happens at a sexism level. We victim blame. Well, she should just leave. Well, how do you leave if you don't know how you're going to support yourself? Because part of what happens in an abusive relationship is that there's someone who is threatened by mere survival, right? How do you leave if you don't know how you're going to feed how do you leave if you don't know how you're going to feed the kids? How do you leave if you think that if you leave the kids, like you have to leave your kids, and then they're going to be abused by the perpetrator who's been abusing you? How do you leave under those circumstances? It seems so simple and binary. Just leave. Yeah, I wouldn't tolerate that. That's what people love to say that about slavery, right? I wouldn't have tolerated that. Come on. Like, we don't know. Actually, we do know. Because people say that about all sorts of things. Like, people say, like, for example, about Nazi Germany. Like, well, I wouldn't have participated in that. Well, maybe you wouldn't have in particular, but most people would have because most people did. And it's just not the case that everyone who claims that they would have been, a justice warrior in this situation or in that situation would have been. Because if that many people would have actually been standing up for what's right, the horrible thing wouldn't have happened in the first place. And we're not now all of a sudden, different and better than the vast majority of people who existed 30 years ago. Like, people largely aren't that transformed from one generation to the next. So it's important to think about these things in reality. We've got 5 minutes left, and I haven't even scratched the surface. I would like for a second, especially if you're a man, turn to a woman near you. But if there's not, if you're not, turn to someone next to you and just share, what do you think masculinity is? Just take a second. Let's take a second right now. Turn to the person next to you. Anyway, what is masculinity? Like Tina and Ann, what is masculinity to you? What do you think it is? Or among 3 people or whatever. About 10 more seconds. Okay. Has everyone gotten a chance to share a little bit about what you think masculinity is? Because I actually looked that up this morning because I realized I don't know what masculinity is either, right? Masculinity, according to Merriam-Webster, is qualities or attributes regarded as characteristic of men. And the examples it gave were muscular, tall, strong, things like that. Okay. Now I want to take another, I'm going to time it this time, 20 seconds, and share what do you think toxic masculinity is? Go. I'm sorry, I'm giving you short shrift on this one because I only had 5 minutes 2 minutes ago. So I'm going to share from the Journal of School of Psychology. Toxic masculinity is the constellation of socially regressive or masculine, and they did put that in quotes, traits that serve to foster domination, devaluation of women, homophobia, and wanton violence. So if we look at the Merriam-Webster definition of masculinity and the definition of toxic masculinity, what do they have in common? I can't find much. Right, they have the word masculine in common. So one of the things that happens in our society, and this happens especially when we're trying to have a conversation around oppression, is, I can't think of the term now, basically a straw man argument. So we talk about toxic masculinity, and people say, they're attacking masculinity. Well, they're not attacking masculinity or men. They're attacking toxic masculinity, which means they're attacking the idea that men are superior and should be allowed to control women. If we look at conversations about racism, the same red herring occurs across the board. So I just wanted to take a second and start to identify that when we're talking about an oppression, and in this case, misogyny, patriarchy, sexism, there is the requirement to have a useful conversation. It is required that we engage with the nuance and that we actually make an attempt to understand what's being said. So I had this men's group, and we had all these conversations, and people laughed when I said this, like where we talked about the areas where our spouses told us we were reinforcing the patriarchy, and we didn't think we were. And I'm not going to get into the details. I don't really have permission from people to talk about that. I can talk very briefly about my experience since then, though. My experience since then is that I finally had, and this is another thing that causes people to feel like, a safe space to explore what was being said that felt hurtful to me and my reaction to that without having to have the person who was like dealing with all of the stuff around that have to like stop and explain to me Feminism 101. Like I got to go sort that out with men, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I feel that way. And then we'd read a chapter like, I guess I was an idiot. But I wasn't an idiot. I just said, we're socialized a certain way, right? People are socialized a certain way. You know, there is this talk about how many, you don't even have to raise your hands. You can even just mentally check a box if you want. How many people have had the experience of having your spouse or partner or someone come to you and say, the load that I'm carrying is too much. And then you're kind of sitting there like, well, the load that I'm carrying is too much too, right? And it kind of turns into this, like, not really able to listen, right? Because I feel like what I carry is being invalidated and things like that. And my experience with that has been that there's some distinct things happening, right? There's this ticker, it could be called, right? In some cases, it's this checklist of things that are required for the kids to have an emotionally decent childhood, or to successfully navigate school, or the things that have to happen in the household for the household to function effectively, right? There's all these things, all these logistics that get handled, like this is St. Patrick's Day, and who's going to put green coloring into the milk, or who's going to make green eggs and ham, or things like that, right? And there's all these logistics that go on, and I got to be honest, I didn't pay much attention to them. In truth, I was focused on certain things that were really important. I was focused on, because I was primarily responsible for bringing like enough income to support everything, so I was focused on that. But I used that in some ways as an excuse for not focusing on the things that were important for us to have a quality family experience. And I was resentful about being expected to participate in that because I felt like I was doing too much. Now, on some level, there is a breakdown of labor, right? Like on some level, that has to happen. You can't do everything. But I wasn't being responsible for the fact that I was literally undermining the efforts of the person who had accepted this other responsibility. I was actively undermining that. So it's like, I thought that I was doing something great if I pushed a vacuum around the living room, Like, if I wasn't even aware of it at the time, and I know I got to shut up, I'm sorry. I wasn't even aware of it at the time, but there's this thing called the 5 languages of love, and one of the languages of love is service, right? And I would have thought that, I kind of characterize that as service, right? Like, pushing the vacuum around the living room is service. Like, that's being an adult. That is not a service to Tara. My pushing the stupid vacuum around the living room is not a service to Tara. That's just being an adult, right? Service is something that has Tara feel loved. Like, my thing is the dishes, right? If there are dirty dishes in the sink, I'm angry about it. And I'm like, oh, put the stupid dishes in the thing. We'll just leave them there for Mike, That's like, it's all that, right? And I'm not even exaggerating, okay? So if someone puts the dishes in the dishwasher, I don't experience that as an expression of love. I experience that as, finally, they quit disrespecting me. An expression of love would be something else, right? So if you think that you're pushing the vacuum around the living room is communicating to someone else in your house that you love them, you're mistaken. What you're expressing, finally, is that you don't have a profound level of disrespect for them. Now, I don't mean that you aren't trying to express love, because maybe you hate vacuuming, maybe you hate taking the garbage out, maybe to you it's kind of a big deal that you're doing that, right? So I'm not saying that you're not trying to express love, I'm saying it's not expressing love. Something else is required to have your partner experience love. Pushing the vacuum around or not leaving a dirty dish in the sink isn't going to cut it. And I'll shut up now. Thank you for your time.
this one. Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to say our offering today is taken for the Afghan Family Sponsorship Fund. And we co-sponsor Afghan refugee family with the UU Church in Santa Fe, as many of you know. And we are definitely looking for new volunteers as well to sign up and help with those efforts. So if you do feel called to get more involved, let me know. I don't think Kelly Shea is here, but Kelly Shea is our awesome person that heads up volunteers from our church. And then Gail Wasserman is another person at the UU Church in Santa Fe. And they've been doing a lot of work and have lots of appointments to go to. There's a new baby, so I'm taking the mom and the new baby to La Familia and getting their appointments. And so they just need lots of help in that regard. So if you are so able to help out, yeah, we definitely need more volunteers to kind of help out. And actually, like, I got to interact with them on Saturday and take them out to the Ren Fair, and it was super fun. And so you just really get to know this family that has 6 kids, a mom and a dad, and they are the most sweet people and caring and loving people that you could even imagine. And the kids are amazing, and the oldest ones are learning English, and so they help translate, which is helpful with the mom. And the mom just laughs. You try to communicate with gestures and all those things. And it's really, you can go with Kelly the first time, so it's less intimidating for you. But once you kind of get a feel of it, I will say, like, I went with Kelly a few times and with Gail a few times, because it is intimidating when you think about, like, going into this family's house. But I will say, please, any help you can give, sign up, and we'll get you connected. And right now, we will take the offering for their sponsorship. So thank you.
Thank you, Yelena. So the announcements today can be found on the back side of the service, and you can see that we have the OWL curriculum program beginning today for 7th to 9th grade. You can talk to Tina DeYoe after the service, and she already talked about the social justice actions that are happening now. Please join now in singing hymn number 170. And Yelena, are you going to be playing this? You are. Okay, great. I heard something about a cappella. I was like, no, let's do it with Yelena. Thank you.
Okay. So tonight, for benediction, I'm taking a quote from, and it's actually not bell hooks. It's taken from Harriet Lerner, The Dance of Intimacy. But it's what bell hooks chose to open the will to change. In our rapidly changing society, we can count on only two things that will never change. What will never change is the will to change and the fear of change. It is the will to change that motivates us to seek help. And it is the fear of change that motivates us to resist the very help we seek.
Let's go have some coffee and enjoy each other outside and have some food, snacks.